One sentence stopped the show cold. Comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was just Elon Musk sitting across from Stephen Colbert saying something so raw the cameras almost forgot to roll. The studio lights burned bright, but the air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. The audience, packed tight in their seats, didn't clap. They didn't laugh. They just watched, caught in a silence that wasn't planned. Stephen Colbert leaned forward, his smile tight. He was used to controlling the room, his room. The desk, polished and neat, held his notes, each question carefully picked to keep. Things smooth. His suit was sharp, his tie a perfect knot. But tonight, something was off. His fingers tapped the desk once, just once. A small sign he wasn't as calm as he looked. Across from him sat Elon Musk. Not the billionaire in a sleek suit, but a man in a plain black shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair a little messy. His eyes were steady, locked on Colbert like he could see through him. Elon wasn't here to play the game. He never was. The world knew him as the guy who built rockets, cars, and dreams bigger than most could imagine. But dreams come with weight. Every step he took, every tweet, every idea, drew eyes, critics, and enemies. He was a man who lived on the edge of what was possible, and that edge was sharp. The studio felt alive, buzzing with unspoken tension. The crew stood behind the cameras, headsets on, waiting for a cue. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing something big. The set was simple, blue curtains, a city skyline backdrop, but it felt like a stage for something more than a talk show. It was a battleground, and nobody knew it yet. Colbert cleared his throat. "Elon, you've been in the news a lot," he started, his voice smooth but careful. "You said something about freedom last week. Something bold. Care to explain?" Elon didn't move, didn't smile. "I said freedom isn't free if you're scared to speak." The words landed like a stone in still water. Ripples spread. Colbert's eyebrow twitched, but he kept his grin. "That's a big claim," he said, leaning in. "You're saying people can't speak freely? Here? Now?" Elon's gaze didn't waver. "I'm saying most people think they're free until they say something that costs them," the audience murmured. A low hum, not quite agreement, not quite shock. Colbert glanced at them, then back at Elon. His hand rested on his notes, but he didn't look down. He didn't need to. He knew this wasn't going as planned. Flashback. 2 days earlier. Elon sat in a quiet room, a laptop open, screens glowing, with messages. Hate, praise, threats. His phone buzzed, but he ignored it. He was tired. Not the kind sleep could fix. Tired of filters, tired of rules, tired of a world that cheered his wins but hissed at his words. He'd built machines to touch the stars, but tonight he just wanted to speak. Plain, clear, true. Back in the studio, the moment stretched. Colbert tapped his pen, a soft click against the desk. "So, you're here to... what? Call out the system?" His voice had an edge now, sharp but controlled. Elon leaned forward just an inch. "I'm here to say the system doesn't like questions it can't answer." The silence was real. Not staged. Not for laughs. Colbert's smile faded, just for a second. He looked at Elon, really looked at him, like he was seeing the man behind the name. A man who dreamed of Mars but fought on Earth. A man who carried hope and scars in equal measure. The crew shifted behind the cameras. Someone whispered, too soft to hear. The audience held its breath. Colbert opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't used to this feeling of the room slipping away. And then Elon spoke again, his voice low, steady. "You ask me questions, Stephen. But who's asking you?" The words hung there, heavy, sharp. Colbert froze. His hand stopped moving. The studio lights seemed brighter, the air tighter. The audience didn't make a sound. What did Elon mean? And why did it feel like the whole show was about to break apart? The studio lights burned hotter now. Or maybe it just felt that way. Elon Musk sat still, his question, "Who's asking you?" lingering like smoke. Stephen Colbert's face tightened, his eyes flicking to the control room glass. No cue came. No voice in his ear. Just the weight of a moment he couldn't steer. The audience felt it too, their silence sharp, waiting for something to break. Colbert forced a laugh, short and thin. "That's a clever line, Elon," he said, his voice a little too smooth. "But let's be real. You're on my show. I'm the one asking questions here." Elon didn't blink. "Are you?" The words cut deep, not loud, not angry, but heavy with truth. Colbert's hand froze on his pen. The crew behind the cameras stood rigid, one of them glancing at the floor, avoiding the scene. The air was thick, like the seconds before lightning strikes. Colbert leaned forward, his smile gone. "You think I'm dodging something? Say it plain." Elon's voice stayed low, steady. "I'm saying you're part of a machine that picks what's safe to say. And you know it," the audience gasped. A soft ripple of shock. Colbert's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a challenge, it was personal. He'd built his career on sharp wit, on asking tough questions, on making power squirm. But now, Elon was turning the mirror on him. And the reflection wasn't kind. Flashback. A week ago. Colbert, in his dressing room, pacing. His phone glowed with messages from the network. "Keep it light," one read. "Musk is a wild card," another warned. He tossed the phone on the couch, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He wasn't afraid of tough interviews. He'd grilled senators, CEOs, even dictators. But Elon? Elon was different. Not because of his money or his fame, but because he didn't play by the rules. And Colbert knew, deep down, that some rules weren't his to break. Back in the studio, the tension climbed. Colbert tapped his desk, a slow, deliberate rhythm. "You're accusing me of—" "What? Being a puppet?" His voice was sharp now, almost raw. Elon leaned forward, just an inch. "I'm saying you're trapped. You can push, but only so far. There's a line you won't cross. Not because you're weak, because you're smart." The words landed like a punch. Colbert's eyes narrowed, his breath catching for a split second. He wasn't used to this, being seen, being called out, not as a host, but as a man with bills, a family, a career built on knowing where the edges were. He felt the pressure, not just from Elon, but from the room, the cameras, the unseen eyes upstairs. The crew was silent. No one moved. The director's hand hovered over a button, ready to cut to commercial. But he didn't. Not yet. Something was happening. Something too real to stop. Colbert straightened, his voice low. "You think I'm scared? I've asked harder questions than you know." "Have you?" Elon's tone was calm, but it carried a challenge. "Or do you just ask the ones that fit the script?" The studio felt smaller now, the walls closing in. Colbert's fingers curled around his pen, knuckles white. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But he was cornered. And he hated it. Deep down, a voice whispered, "He's right." He'd felt the limits before. The calls from producers. The topics that vanished from his notes. The stories that never made air. He'd told himself it was just the game. But now, with Elon staring him down, it didn't feel like a game anymore. Delayed truth hovered in the air. Elon wasn't just talking about Colbert. There was something bigger. Something he hadn't said yet. His eyes held a secret, a warning, like he knew what was coming. But he wasn't ready to spill it. Not yet. Colbert pushed back, his voice rising. "You're sitting here, Elon, saying the system's broken, but you're part of it. You're building it. AI, rockets, platforms. You're not some rebel. You're the system." Elon's face didn't change, but his voice dropped, colder now. "I'm not the system. I'm the one they're trying to stop." The audience stirred, a low hum of confusion and awe. Colbert froze. Stop? Who's they? The question burned in his mind, but he didn't ask it. Not yet. He glanced at the control room again, his heart racing. The director's face was pale, his headset off. Something was wrong. Flashback. 3 days ago. Elon in a dark office, a single lamp casting shadows. A man in a suit sat across from him, his voice low. "You go on that show. You keep it clean," the man said. "No games." Elon didn't answer. He just stared, his silence louder than words. The man leaned closer. "You know what happens if you don't." Back in the studio, the moment stretched. Colbert's hands trembled. Just a little. He felt it now, the edge of something dangerous. Elon wasn't just challenging him, he was challenging everything. The network, the rules, the unseen hands that shaped what the world saw. And then, a sound, sharp, sudden. A crackle in Colbert's earpiece. A voice, urgent, from the control room. "Cut him off! Now!" Colbert's eyes widened. He looked at Elon, who hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. But there was a glint in his eyes, like he'd been waiting for this. The lights flickered. The Avridin audience gasped. And then, from the back of the studio, a shadow moved. Someone stepping into the light. Who was it? And why did Elon smile, just for a second, like he'd already won? The shadow in the studio doorway froze everyone. Stephen Colbert's earpiece crackled again, the voice sharper now. "End it, Stephen! Now!" His eyes darted to the figure stepping forward, a man in a dark suit, face half lit, moving with purpose. The audience whispered, a low buzz of fear and confusion. Elon Musk sat calm, his faint smile gone, but his gaze steady, like he'd seen this coming. The lights flickered again, casting long shadows across the set. Colbert's hands gripped the desk, his knuckles pale. He felt it. The walls closing. In, the air too thick to breathe. This wasn't his show anymore. It hadn't been for a while. "Who's that?" Colbert asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. He wasn't asking Elon. He was asking the room, the crew, the universe. No one answered. The man in the suit stopped at the edge of the stage. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, just stood there, eyes locked on Elon. The crew was silent, their headsets off, their faces pale. The audience didn't move. The studio felt like a trap, and Colbert was caught in it. Elon leaned back, just a fraction. "You didn't think they'd let this go on, did you?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. Colbert's heart pounded. They? That word again? The same word Elon had dropped earlier, a hint of something bigger, something he hadn't explained. Colbert's mind raced. He'd hosted presidents, rebels, whistleblowers. He'd danced on the edge of controversy before. But this was different. This felt like the edge of a cliff, and he was already falling. Flashback. Hours before the show. Colbert sat alone in his office, the city skyline dark outside. His coffee was cold, untouched. He stared at a single note on his desk, scribbled in his own handwriting. Don't let him take control. He'd laughed when he wrote it, thinking it was just another guest, another segment. Now, that note felt like a warning he'd ignored. His hands shook as he crumpled it, tossing it into the trash. He wasn't scared then, but he was now. Back in the studio, the man in the suit raised a hand, a small signal. Two more figures appeared behind him, their faces hidden in the dim light. The audience gasped, chairs creaking as people leaned forward. Colbert's earpiece went dead. No crackle, no voice, just silence. His throat tightened. He looked at Elon, searching for answers. "Why are they here?" Colbert asked, his voice breaking, raw, with something close to panic. Elon's eyes softened, just for a moment. Not pity, but understanding. "Because I said too much, and you let me." The words hit like a wave. Colbert's chest tightened, his breath shallow. He wasn't just a host anymore. He was part of this, whatever this was. He'd spent years asking questions, shaping stories, making people laugh. But now, he was the story, and it was unraveling. His hands trembled, his notes useless, scattered on the desk. He felt small, exposed, like a man who'd built a castle only to find it was made of glass. He wanted to stand, to shout, to take back the room. But his body wouldn't move. His voice wouldn't come. The man in the suit took a step closer, and Colbert's mind screamed, "This is it. This is where it ends." His career, his control, his place in the world, slipping through his fingers. He saw it all crumbling. The headlines, the canceled contracts, the empty studio. He'd pushed too far, let Elon go too deep, and now the machine was here to shut it down. The audience was a blur, their faces lost in the shadows. The crew hadn't moved, hadn't breathed. The man in the suit spoke, his voice low, steady. "Time's up, Mr. Colbert." Colbert's eyes stung. He wasn't crying, not yet, but the weight was too much. He looked at Elon, desperate for something, anything, a way out, a reason to keep going. But Elon just watched, his face unreadable. And then, a sound. Soft, almost missed in the chaos. A single clap. It came from the audience. One person, hidden in the dark, clapping slowly, deliberately. Another joined. Then another. The sound grew, uneven but steady, like a heartbeat waking up. Colbert's head snapped toward the crowd, his breath catching. The man in the suit paused, his hand still raised, his eyes narrowing. Elon's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile. He leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "They're listening, Stephen, for the first time. They're really listening." The trill, clapping spread, louder now, not wild, not joyful, but defiant. It wasn't for Colbert, it wasn't for Elon, it was for the truth, raw and unfiltered, spilling out in a room that wasn't supposed to hold it. Colbert's heart raced, a spark, flickering in the darkness of his fear. He wasn't alone The audience. They were with him. They saw it too. The man in the suit lowered his hand, his face unreadable. The two figures behind him shifted, uncertain. The clapping didn't stop. It grew. A wave of sound pushing back against the silence, against the control. Colbert's hands stopped shaking. He looked at Elon, then at the audience, then at the man in the suit. Something shifted inside him. Not hope, not yet, but a fire. Small, but fierce. He wasn't done. Not yet. The man in the suit stepped forward, his voice colder now. "You don't know what you're starting, Mr. Colbert." But before Colbert could answer, the studio doors slammed open, and a new voice cut through the air. A voice that changed everything. Whose voice was it? And what did it mean for the fight that was just beginning? The studio doors crashed open, and the air turned electric. A woman's voice sliced through the clapping, sharp and clear. "Stop this now!" Every head turned. The audience froze, their hands mid-clap. The man in the suit spun around, his teeth calm, mask cracking. Stephen Colbert's heart stopped, his breath caught in his throat. Elon Musk leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, like he'd been waiting for this all along. The woman stepped into the light. She was tall, her face sharp with purpose, her dark coat sweeping behind her. No one knew her, not the crew, not the audience, not Colbert. But her presence filled the room, commanding it in a way that made the studio feel small. She held a tablet, its screen glowing faintly, and her eyes locked on the man in the suit. "You don't get to end this," she said, her voice steady, but burning. The man in the suit took a step toward her, his voice low, threatening. "You're out of line. Leave. Now." She didn't flinch. "No. The world needs to hear this." Colbert's hands gripped the desk, his knuckles white. His mind raced, piecing together fragments. The clapping audience, Elon's cryptic warnings, the man in the suit, this woman. It was all connected. But how? His earpiece was still dead, the control room silent. The crew stood like statues, their faces pale, caught in a moment too big for them to grasp. The woman raised her tablet, her fingers swift. The studio's massive screen flickered, then lit up. Gasps rippled through the audience. On the screen, a document, stamped with a logo Colbert didn't recognize. Words flashed, confidential, project oversight, media control protocol. Below it, a list of names, networks, hosts. His name, Stephen Colbert, was third from the top. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Colbert's stomach dropped, his breath shallow. His name on a list, tied to something called media control. His mind screamed, "This can't be real." But the document stared back, cold and undeniable. He felt exposed, betrayed, not just by the system, but by himself. He'd sensed the limits, the calls from upstairs, the stories that never aired. But seeing it like this, in black and white, was a knife to the gut. Flashback. Months ago. Colbert in a meeting, a sleek boardroom high above the city. A network executive slid a contract across the table. "Standard stuff," the exec said, smiling. "Keeps the show running." Colbert signed without reading, his pen moving on instinct. He'd trusted them, trusted the game. Now, that signature burned in his memory, a chain he hadn't seen until it tightened. Back in the studio, the audience was silent, their eyes glued to the screen. The man in the suit shouted, "Cut the feed!" But no one moved. The crew didn't budge. The director's hands hovered over the controls, then dropped. The woman's voice rang out again. This is what they don't want you to know. They've been shaping what you see, what you think, for years. And Stephen, she turned to him, her eyes piercing, you're part of it. Colbert's face burned. Anger surged, hot and raw, but not at her. At himself. At the years he'd played, along, telling himself it was just show business. His hands shook, his vision blurring. He wanted to scream, to tear the desk apart, to run, but he couldn't. The audience was watching. The cameras were rolling, and Elon was still there, his gaze steady, like a lighthouse in a storm. "Who are you?" Colbert rasped, his voice barely his own. The woman's expression softened, just for a second. "Someone who got tired of hiding." She tapped her tablet, and the screen changed. A video. Grainy, but clear enough. A boardroom, men in suits, voices low. One of them, Colbert recognized. Him, a network higher up, spoke. "Musk is a problem. If he talks, we bury it. Colbert's show is the perfect place to control the narrative." The audience gasped again, louder now. Colbert's chest tightened, his breath hitching. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. It was a violation, a theft of everything he'd built. His show, his voice, his trust, twisted into a tool for someone else's game. He looked at Elon, who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But his eyes said enough. "I tried to warn you." The man in the suit lunged toward the woman, but she stepped back, unafraid. "You can't stop this," she said. "It's already out." She held up her tablet, a live feed showing the document spreading online, thousands of shares, then millions. The truth was free, and it was wildfire. Colbert's anger shifted, hardening into something sharper. Empowerment. He wasn't just a pawn. He was a voice, a platform, a man who could still choose. His hands stopped shaking, his jaw set. He looked at the audience, their faces lit with shock, with hunger for more. They weren't just watching now. They were part of it. The woman turned to him. "Stephen, you can keep playing their game, or you can break it." The man in the suit shouted again, his voice desperate. "You'll lose everything, Colbert. Your show, your career, gone." Colbert stood, his chair scraping loud against the floor. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "Maybe, but I'm done being your puppet." The audience roared, a wave of cheers crashing over the set. The man in the suit froze, his power slipping. Elon's lips curved, the smallest nod of respect. The woman smiled, fierce and proud. Colbert turned to the camera, his eyes burning. "We're not cutting to commercial," he said, his voice raw but strong. "This is live, and we're telling the truth." The studio shook with applause, but the man in the suit wasn't done. He stepped forward, his face twisted with rage, and raised his hand. Something glinted in it. What was he holding? And could Colbert's choice survive what came next? The glint in the man in the suit's hand flashed under the studio lights. A gun. Stephen Colbert's breath stopped. The audience screamed, chairs scraping as people ducked. The woman with the tablet froze, her eyes wide. Elon Musk stood, slow and deliberate, his face hard as stone. The air crackled with fear, thick and suffocating, like the world was holding its breath. The man in the suit pointed the gun at Colbert, his voice a snarl. "You think you can break this? You're nothing. Sit down, or this ends now." Colbert's legs shook, his hands gripping the desk to keep him upright. His heart pounded so loud it drowned out the screams. Everything was at stake. His life, his show, the truth he'd just sworn to tell. If he backed down, the machine would win. The document, the woman's revelation, the audience's fire, it would all be buried. His career, his voice, his soul would be erased. But if he pushed forward, that gun could end it all in a heartbeat. The studio was chaos. The crew scrambled, some diving for cover, others frozen, staring. The cameras kept rolling, red lights blinking, capturing every second. The audience was a sea of panic, but some stayed seated, eyes locked on Colbert, waiting for him to move, to fight. The woman clutched her tablet, her face pale but fierce, like she was ready to charge. Elon stepped forward, his voice calm, cutting through the noise. "You pull that trigger, and you lose everything." The world's watching. The man in the suit laughed, cold and bitter. "The world? They'll see what we let them see. You're done, Musk. And you—" He swung the gun toward the woman. "You should have stayed quiet." Colbert's mind screamed. Do something. Say something. But his throat was dry, his body heavy. He saw it all flashing, his kids' faces, his wife's laugh, the years he'd spent making people smile. Was this how it ended? A bullet on live TV for daring to speak? Doubt clawed at him, whispering he wasn't enough, that he'd already lost. Flashback. A night years ago. Colbert, young, unknown, performing stand-up in a dim club. The crowd was silent, his jokes falling flat. He stood under a single spotlight, sweat on his brow, feeling like a failure. But he kept going, his voice shaking but steady, because he believed one truth. If you speak, someone will hear. That belief had carried him to this desk, this moment. And now, it was all he had left. The man in the suit's finger tightened on the trigger. Time slowed. Colbert's eyes met the woman's, then Elon's. They weren't backing down. Neither could he. His fear burned away, replaced by a fire he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just his fight. It was theirs. The audience, the crew, the millions watching. The truth was out, and no gun could take it back. Colbert stepped from behind the desk, his voice raw but loud. "You want to shoot me? Go ahead. But you can't shoot the truth." The audience roared, a tidal wave of sound. The man in the suit flinched, his hand shaking. The woman seized the moment, hurling her tablet at him. It hit his arm, and the gun clattered to the floor. The audience surged, some rushing the stage, others shouting. The two figures behind the man in the suit hesitated, then fled into the shadows. Colbert lunged for the gun, his hands slipping on the cold metal. The man in the suit dove after him, his fist slamming into Colbert's shoulder. Pain exploded, but Colbert held on, his fingers closing around the handle. They wrestled, a desperate tangle of limbs, the audience screaming, the cameras catching every second. Elon grabbed the man's arm, twisting it back. The woman kicked the gun away, sending it skidding across the stage. Colbert scrambled to his feet, panting, his suit torn, his face flushed with sweat. The man in the suit slumped, pinned by Elon, his fight gone. The studio fell silent. Not staged, not scripted, just real. The audience stood, some crying, some cheering, their voices, a raw, unshakable force. The crew emerged from hiding, their faces lit with awe. The woman retrieved her tablet, its screen still glowing with the truth, now spreading faster than anyone could stop. Colbert stood at the center of the stage, his chest heaving. He looked at the audience, at Elon, at the woman. His shoulder throbbed, his hands shook, but he felt alive. He'd faced the machine and won. The truth was free, and he'd been its voice. He turned to the camera, his eyes burning. "This is our show now," he said, his voice steady, unbroken, "and we're not going quiet." The audience erupted, their cheers shaking the walls. The cameras zoomed in, the red lights steady. The man in the suit was dragged off by security, his threats empty now. Elon nodded at Colbert, a silent acknowledgement. The woman smiled, her mission complete. The screen behind them flickered, the document still there, its words a promise. The truth can't be buried. Colbert stood tall, his fear gone, his purpose clear. The fight wasn't over. There'd be consequences, battles to come. But for now, he'd won. The machine had cracked, and the world was watching. The lights didn't dim. The cameras didn't cut. And Colbert, for the first time in years, felt free. The studio was still, but the air hummed with aftermath. Stephen Colbert stood at the center of the stage, his suit torn, his shoulder aching where the man in the suit had struck him. The gun was gone, secured by security, its threat a fading echo. The audience sat quiet now, their cheers spent, their faces a mix of awe and exhaustion. The cameras still rolled, red lights steady, but the show wasn't a show anymore. It was Elon Musk sat back in his chair, his eyes calm but heavy, like a man who'd seen this storm before. The woman with the tablet stood off stage, her screen dark now, her mission done. The crew moved slowly, resetting lights, whispering among themselves. The man in the suit was gone, dragged away, his power shattered. But the weight of what had happened lingered, heavy as the truth itself. Colbert's hands trembled, not from fear now, but from the rush of surviving. He looked at the audience, their eyes locked on him, not as a host, but as a man who'd fought and won. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with something deeper. Pride, grief, and a strange, fragile hope. He'd faced the machine, the gun, the lies. He'd stared into the abyss of his own complicity and chosen to break free. But freedom came with a cost. Flashback, years ago. Colbert at his first big gig, a tiny stage, a nervous kid with a microphone. He'd stumbled through his lines, but one moment stuck. An old comedian, grizzled and kind, grabbed his shoulder. "Kid," he said, "truth is the only thing that lasts. Don't ever trade it." Colbert had nodded, not understanding then. Now, standing in the wreckage of his studio, he understood. He'd traded pieces of that truth over the years, small compromises for a bigger stage. Tonight, he'd taken it back. The studio lights dimmed slightly, casting soft shadows. Colbert's voice, when he spoke, was low, cracked, but steady. "You saw it," he said, looking into the camera. "All of it. The document, the fight, the truth." He paused, his breath catching. "I didn't know how deep this went. I didn't want to know. But you made me see." The audience stirred, a soft murmur of agreement. Some nodded, others wiped tears. They weren't just viewers now. They were witnesses. Colbert's eyes stung, but he didn't look away. He felt their weight, their trust, their hunger for something real. He'd spent years giving them laughs, but tonight he'd given them something heavier, something that couldn't be taken back. He turned to Elon, who met his gaze with a quiet nod. No words, just understanding. The woman stepped forward, her face softer now, her fight won. "You did it, Stephen," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You broke the script." Colbert's throat tightened. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. He'd broken the script, yes, but at what cost? His show might not survive this. The network would come for him. Lawsuits, blacklists, whispers of unstable. His name on that document would haunt him, a scar he'd carry forever. But as he looked at the audience, at the crew, at the cameras still rolling, he felt something new. Strength. Not the kind that wins fights, but the kind that keeps going after them. He thought of the years ahead, the battles, the truths still buried. He wasn't naive. Breaking one chain didn't end the war. But tonight, he'd lit a spark. The document was out, spreading across the world, unstoppable. People would ask questions now, demand answers. And he'd be there, not as a host, but as a voice, flawed but honest. Colbert walked to the edge of the stage, his steps slow, deliberate. The audience leaned forward, hanging on his silence. He looked at them, really saw them. Mothers, students, dreamers, skeptics. People who'd trusted him to make sense of the world. He'd failed them before, but not tonight. "Think about what you saw here," he said, his voice steady now. "Not just the fight, but what it means. Who controls what you hear? Who decides what's true? You watched this happen. Now ask yourself, what's next?" The silence was gentle, not heavy. A shared breath, a moment of clarity. The crew stood straighter, their eyes on him. The woman smiled, small but proud. Elon watched, his face unreadable, but his presence steady, like a reminder that some fights never end. Colbert took a deep breath, his shoulder aching, his heart full. He'd lost something tonight, his innocence, his safety, his place in the machine. But he'd gained more, a truth he could live with, a voice he could trust, a chance to be the man he'd always wanted to be. He looked into the camera one last time, his eyes clear, his voice soft but sure. The truth doesn't need a stage. It just needs someone to speak it. The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. Their silence said enough. A quiet promise that they'd carry this moment with them. The lights faded. The cameras stopped. Colbert stood there, alone but not lonely, as the studio went dark. The story was over, but its echo would linger in him, in them, in a world that was just beginning to wake up. "Think about what you saw here," he said, his voice steady now. "Not just the fight, but what it means. Who controls what you hear? Who decides what's true? You watched this happen. Now ask yourself, what's next?" The silence was gentle, not heavy. A shared breath, a moment of clarity. The crew stood straighter, their eyes on him. The woman smiled, small but proud. Elon watched, his face unreadable, but his presence steady, like a reminder that some fights never end. Colbert took a deep breath, his shoulder aching, his heart full. He'd lost something tonight, his innocence, his safety, his place in the machine. But he'd gained more, a truth he could live with, a voice he could trust, a chance to be the man he'd always wanted to be. He looked into the camera one last time, his eyes clear, his voice soft but sure. The truth doesn't need a stage. It just needs someone to speak it. The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. Their silence said enough. A quiet promise that they'd carry this moment with them. The lights faded. The cameras stopped. Colbert stood there, alone but not lonely, as the studio went dark. The story was over, but its echo would linger. In him, in them, in a world that was just beginning to wake up.